Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa LaRue. I'm a lead of the SVRI Faith and GBV community of practice. And if you're here, you are one of our COP members. So welcome. Um, and today is the start of a webinar series that we're having on practice-based knowledge and specifically PBK, practice-based knowledge, what it is and why it matters to our faith and GBV responses. So it's going to be a 1 hour webinar and we'll have three more. Now, today is like a entry level splashing into it kind of thing. And then with our second, third, and fourth webinar, we'll have various experts, various practitioners that have used PBK, that have collected PBK, analyzed PBK, and helped it guide their work and used it to help guide their work. We'll have them joining as expert speakers and sharing their experiences. But like I said, today is like PBK 101, but specifically in relation to faith and violence against women and children. If you go to the next slide, please, Paula. Let me just check here. Um, like I said at the start, it would be great if you can introduce yourself in the chat. Today is not supposed to be a lecture. It's a meeting. So anyone can unmute themselves at any time. You can use the chat box. We can engage. So I really want to invite openness and curiosity, and let's all contribute. If you're not speaking, I do want to ask that you keep yourself on mute, just for the noise levels, because we are recording this session and it will be made available to COP members and on our CRP's website. While we're busy, please use the chat box for comments and questions, but you can also raise your hand to just add something if you want to add something or ask something in the moment. And then the last one, if your bandwidth, if your internet is good enough, please keep your video on, because it's just nice to see people. But of course, if your internet's not good enough, that is totally fine. If you go to the next slide, please, Paula. We're going to do a Zoom poll to get ourselves started. We're going to ask you three questions, and you just yes or no on it. Is it, where do they access the Zoom poll? Is it in the chat, Paula? Or am I being silly? There it is. It's on screen now. There, I'm seeing it. So I want you to just respond to the three questions. Can you think of a time where something you have learned by doing your work has been counter to the way that you were taught or that research evidence shows? And the second one is, can you think of a moment, big or small, where you learned something in practice that shaped how you or others respond to violence against women and children? Then finally, can you think of a time that you adjusted the way you respond to violence in your community because of something you learned in practice rather than from something you learned from a book or from a study? If we can all just quickly respond. There, I see. Okay, I'm giving it, this is so interesting. I'm giving it maybe like 10 more seconds. And we're going to come back to this. It's just it's nice to have a sense of the room. Paula, if we end the poll, that's fine with you. So if we look at the first question, have you learned something in your work that was different from what you were taught or what the research said? 78%. So we're not that many in the room yet. So as 7 people said yes, 2 people said no. Then with the second question, have you ever learned something through practice that changed how you or others responded to violence against women or children? 8 out of 9 said yes. And then the final one is, have you ever changed your response because of what you learned in practice? And then 7 people again said yes, and 2 said, I don't know. So people, the reason why we started with this poll is if we look at those questions again, in a nutshell, this is what practice-based knowledge is. I would say maybe in the last 5 to 7 years, practice-based knowledge has become a term that we're hearing more and more within the violence space. And as our research and our understanding of it evolves, I think it might at times be intimidating, but that really is just it. It's the wisdom, not just the knowledge, not just the information, but the wisdom that comes directly from practice. So it's shaped by our lived experience, by the mistakes that we make, by our trial and error, by our cultural context, by our spiritual context. And I'm hoping that those three poll questions really connected that for you, that we really start to recognize that the work that we do really is a source of knowledge and wisdom that should be guiding, that experiences that we're having should be guiding how we're doing our work. Um, Unlike research evidence, which aims to be generalizable and systematic, which is very important, PBK, practice-based knowledge, is immediate and it's contextual and it's responsive. Um, it tells us what works here right now for this community in this moment. So especially when we're in crisis context, and I think many of us experienced that during COVID, it was the PBK that the learning by doing in the moment that really helped many of us to respond appropriately and adaptively to how our communities were just changing in those times. If you can go to the next slide, please, Paula. And the next one, please. So, and the next one, I see I kept forgetting to ask you to change the slides. I'm sorry. So these are two definitions that I think are very useful for us to understand PBK, and from two organizations, the Prevention Collaborative and Raising Voices, that have been really active and I think instrumental, especially raising voices around highlighting to the world the importance of practice-based knowledge. So if we look at the first definition, practice-based knowledge is the cumulative knowledge, so building, and the cumulative knowledge and learning acquired by practitioners through years of innovation, reflection, and refinement. It includes insights gained from observations, conversations, direct experience, and program monitoring. So I think what's really important to realize from that definition, or to get from that definition, is how wide, how inclusive those sources of PBK is. While research evidence is very important and a crucial part of evidence building, PBK emphasizes that evidence building is also being done by practitioners and that their learning is also an important source of learning. But our big challenge is that it's not always captured or used or even valued by the field. And that is not something that's only true to those of us working within the violence and faith space. I think that is generally true of the violence against women and children space. I think it has been changing in the last few years as this emphasis on PBK is growing. But I think this gap that we have around it not being captured or used or disseminated is one of the big challenges that we have. And that is what our webinar series will also be focusing on, is how do we go about capturing PBK? How do we use it to improve our praxis? And then how do we disseminate it? Then if we look at the second definition from Raising Voices, you will see that some some organizations prefer to talk about practice-based learning. So this definition is practice-based learning as the cumulative journey of intentional learning over time, informed by insights gained from direct experiences, observations, stories, informal reflections, monitoring processes, and more. So again, those diverse sources. Now, next slide, please. PBK remains an evolving concept, and I saw Arti on the call, and they've been doing incredible research and work around practice-based knowledge and how to use it in the violence against children space. And next year, towards the end of this year, they'll be launching their report and framework, and working on that more next year. And we'll keep you informed on all of that. But even in that work, we see that this is not a static concept, and the definitions aren't static, and neither are the ways that we engage and use it. So I think one of the challenges is, and one of the criticisms towards the concept is that people then just say, well, anything that comes from the field is PBK, and that can lead to a lack of precision. PBK isn't just an equivalent to qualitative data. Like, okay, so it's stories and people talking, that's PBK. There really isn't hard and fast rules for the specific forms of data that can be classified as PBK. And I think that's maybe sometimes why people actually struggle to know how to identify and analyze and engage with it. And that's what we're going to be discussing a lot more in this webinar series. And then in the rest of the start of next year, be working with some of our COP members around capturing PBK and analyzing and disseminating it from their respective contexts. What PBK, though, consistently highlights is the importance of centering the learning insights of those working on the ground in communities and those who are engaging directly with those that programming is supposed to be benefiting. So I think PBK in that way should be seen as more closely connected to where the work is actually happening. And that's also why some people see it as a bit as counterintuitive within the VAWG space, that where it's often prioritized having external consultants come in and they make the decisions, that can be quite removed from the communities where the work is done. At the same time, PBK should not be seen as in competition with other forms of knowledge. It's not a replacement or a contradiction. But it really resonates with this idea around decolonizing knowledge, which the COP has been doing work on, especially Working Group 1, but is also a concept that has been around for quite a while now. How do we decolonize our knowledge and our research practices? And the importance of bringing diverse and often marginalized voices better into our research and then into guiding our practice. Lastly, PBK is often informal and collected in informal ways, like the previous definition showed us, through stories, through conversations, and that can be their strength because they center that PBK can center the ordinary and the everyday. And those things that we learn without even realizing that we're learning it. It's just a process of doing that leads to knowing and to knowledge. Okay, that's a lot, and I want to bring it back to the group and that we discuss this as a group a bit. If we can go to the next slide, please, Paula. I think maybe some of you who are great cooks or good bakers, I think recipes could be a good way of illustrating PBK or showing the importance or usefulness of PBK. Because very often you get a recipe that shows you the ingredients and the steps, and this is how you bake this cake. But more and more that you bake the cake, you figure out, okay, well, it's actually better if the butter is room temperature rather than directly out of the fridge. Or you realize, oh, you should put the cake on the left side of your oven because the right side is always too hot and it burns. It's those really practical knowing by doing things that you learn that makes that cake better and better. Um, uh, but it was never written down on the piece of paper with a recipe from the start. Um, Now, those kinds of tips and tricks, or tricks, those that kind of insight and knowledge, um, we should be respecting. And if we think about like these great Michelin star chefs, and they're revered for how they figured out these tips and tricks for making, using the best chocolate cake recipe and making it even better. And how their practices then becomes the way that everyone does it. So having that metaphor in mind, I want to invite you to please unmute your mic, any of you, and to share with us as a group, please, if you can give us an example from your life, from your experience, or it could be of a colleague's, of where the knowledge that you got from doing, so the PBK that you gained, influenced how your organization or an organization that you used to work with influenced that organization in its work and how it was addressing violence against women and children. Now, I know this is risky, just putting the question out there. Ooh, and I'm hoping you're not hearing the noise in the background on my side. But if anyone feels comfortable with sharing, just with a bigger group, if you have an example of how your PBK, how your learning by doing influenced your organization's general practice. Harthi, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. As I shared, I work at the Safe Futures Hub, but the example I'll share is from my earlier work with survivors as a lawyer. And we used to represent survivors in court. I was a lawyer. We had a team of social workers, and we were always told that, this is what trauma-informed practice is, and these are the tips and the tools. But often when children go to the court to testify, young survivors, it's so hard, right, for them to come and speak about their stories. So we knew that, these are trauma-informed tools, etc. But slowly over time, we realized that simple things like just asking them, to choose where they want to sit, or if they want to color or do something else. So we're building that choice in. So we knew that one trauma-informed principle is choice, but what that actually looks like was something we learned over practice. And then the courtroom also gives children a lot of toys, but we realized children don't necessarily feel safe with new toys. So we started inviting children to bring their own toys from home and just something comfortable to hold on. And that's something then we made a practice that every social worker and lawyer actually checks in with children. And then we also put that in guidances, like informal guidance for others as well. Thank you.
Arti, thank you so much. And again, it's something that people would never think of putting in a manual or putting in a book or putting in a journal article, but it's such a crucially practical but impactful way of doing that you just learned from practice. Thank you so much, Arti. Anyone else? Susie, thank you. You saw how I'm struggling with the silence and not trying to fill it, so you you put up your hand. Thank you.
So I am a survivor of both child sexual abuse and domestic abuse, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. I have been trying to implement change in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints for a few years now. and it hasn't been effective. Learning, having gone through these things, and just one of my ecclesiastical leaders, he actually was different. He was an academic at Harvard. He's a dean at the divinity school, and he had never dealt with trauma or sexual abuse before. So he actually journeyed with me for a decade reading books about trauma and sexual abuse, so that he wanted to walk this path with me and learn, and actually informed his teaching at the divinity school. So he said it was, a shared thing. And then once he was released, because we have lay clergy, so they switch positions or whatever. The leaders that have followed him have continued to hurt me because they are not trauma informed. And I have actually tried to encourage them and ask them to be trauma informed. And they just receive no training whatsoever. And I keep urging them. And I think I've learned this through practice. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is huge. They have 300 billion in, financial assets. They're the largest, richest church in the world, and they're international. They're global. They have the ability to, trauma inform their leaders. Bishops are first time, usually first responders. And so we've learned through practice. I've gone through like 3 sets or 4 sets of actually 5 sets of bishops. And we're trying to get them to make change. And it's been very difficult. So anyway, yeah, practice. They don't want to, I'm trying to get the practice in place to help people like me. So thank you.
Susie, just thank you so much for sharing from your very personal experiences. And I think an important thing that you also highlight here, and I think I'm guilty of this when I talk about PBK, we often talk about it as such a positive. It's showing all the good things, and that research isn't highlighting, but the PBK will pick up on all the good things that we're doing. But practice-based knowledge is also a way of picking up the things that are not working, and where there are gaps. And thank you for sharing that, Susie. Charles, I'm going to hand over to you, please. I'm not hearing you right now, or is this just me? No, others aren't hearing you either. It's showing you're muted now, but it didn't.
Can you hear me
You're
now?
Yes, there you
Oh,
are.
right. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so I was just listening to the other two respondents, and I was like thinking, initially I posted trying to like look at the comparisons between practice-based knowledge and evidence-based practice, and how they are closely related. And I know that from our own experience, I volunteer and work with an organization that supports young people, young girls in rural communities, especially around menstrual hygiene practices. Particularly, sometimes we also work with young adolescent girls and young women living with HIV. So over the years, we've been supporting them with menstrual products and menstrual health education activities. Um, but we realized that we try to push away the boys initially when we started, and we keep the boys at bay, and even the teachers in secondary schools keep the boys aside while interventions are provided just for the girls. And over the years, doing this, we realized that integrating and bringing the boys closer actually helps with knowledge, both for the girls and as well for the boys, and also limit some of the things that we see that make boys to actually disturb the processes. we realize that when we include boys in the interactions, there are limited or drastically reduced disruptions during the interventions. And you realize also that even the question and answer sections that we introduce, the girls pick up more knowledge, the feedbacks when the boys are present than when we push them away. So, as against the norm in the environment where I work, this is totally different. This is not the norm, but practice has shown that when you integrate boys, when you carry the boys along, when you are pushing things around menstrual hygiene, that uptake of knowledge is increased, little or no disruptions, and participation is also increased. And overall, the key indicators that we use to track the success of the interventions are actually very, very increased when we integrate boys in the program. So um, while we are just like having these discussions, I just thought about that and I felt that it's something worthy to actually share with the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. It's such a counterintuitive finding,
Yeah.
unexpected, like you said, and I now need to concentrate not to abuse my power by asking you more questions because I'm so curious right now. But that's such a strong example of how your practice, your doing,
Mm.
countered,
The
I
norm.
think the
Yeah.
norm, but also
Yeah.
how it's been being
Yeah.
done up to
Yeah.
that stage. So, thank you so much for that, Charles. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move us on. We're going to come back to small group discussions in a bit, depending on how many people we are. But the reason why we're doing this series on practice-based knowledge is the COP has is bigger than we ever expected that it would be. And we've had amazing participation, active participation from people across the globe, from practitioners, hands-on involved in various faith-related spaces around addressing GBV. And through our past year of in our different working groups and with the broader COP engaging with all of you different members, it's just been so clear that there is so much knowledge there. I think, for example, of Working Group 2 and the amazing short course that they developed, and that has been fundamentally based on the experiences and learning from Working Group 2 members. And the same with what Working Group 3 developed around advocacy and how to engagement between faith actors and policymakers. So what our PBK focus is around is that we come alongside COP members where it is requested, where it is desired, to work further along the engagement and the capturing and the analysis and the dissemination, the using of PBK. Because I think, up to this point now, there's a general realization, yes, practice-based knowledge is a component of our understanding of violence. But I think many of us working in the field is still unsure, like, okay, but how do I actually find the PBK that I have, that my organization has? And then do I just write it on a piece of paper? Like, what's the next step? Whereas if you do a survey, or RCT, there's very clear steps written down in a book for what you need to do. So this webinar series will be taking those next steps, exploring how different people and different organizations have been doing it. Now, why does practice-based knowledge matter in the faith and GBV space? Now, violence against women and children, it's deeply shaped by context, as all of us know. Norms and traditions and power relations and religion and trust within a specific context, and no two communities are alike. Um, and that means that the way that our solutions need to be grounded in the realities of people's lives, the specificity of their lives. So recognizing and responding to practice-based knowledge allow us to be grounded in such ways. So for example, PBK creates the space that survivors can teach us through their experiences what safety really looks like. And Susie, I'm really connecting now to what you said. And then practitioners, they learn often in hard ways through the mistakes they make, which interventions help and which ones backfire. So that needs to be responded to, and we need to be listening to that. And that, I think, is a general rule, a general important thing for the violence space. But in terms of our faith and violence against women and children intersect, I think arguably PBK becomes even more important. Recognition for the role of faith and faith actors in addressing gender inequality and violence against women, and just within international development, I think it's increased over the last 20 years or so. And also in the ending violence space, there's also more recognition for the role of faith and faith actors. But I think, it's still quite fringe or marginal, and why formal research has increased. We are seeing more formal research being done, more papers, reports, journal articles. It's still not, I think, nearly extensive enough. For example, the vast majority of the existing formal research around faith and violence against women and children is focused on Christian settings and Christianity, with Islam and Muslim settings coming in a distant second. So if you consider the variety of faiths that there are in the world, we don't nearly have enough formal research around these intersections. And the existing research is also super focused on sub-Saharan Africa and the US. So we have geographical gaps as well. So if we only rely on formal research evidence, we're missing the nuances. And PBK is a way of ensuring that our responses are not only evidence informed, but also experience informed in a way that allows us to cover more ground, I think, as well. Next slide, please. I think I skipped a slide now, Paula. Yes, next slide. Okay, there, please. Maybe 4 key points around why PBK is so important to this intersection of faith and GBV. So faith communities are super diverse, and a PBK allows for reflection on how interventions play out in these specificities, these specific cultural and religious and social contexts. So for example, survivors and community members, their lived experiences often reveal the barriers and opportunities that theory or policy alone can't anticipate. Then second, policies or research insights, formal research insights, they really risk being very abstract if they're not tested against or with what practitioners on the ground are encountering. And especially around policy, we often see a disconnect there. So PBK can help translate these policy commitments to approaches that resonate within faith settings, which often operate according to their own authority structures and tradition and languages. So PBK can become that bridge that makes collaboration between practitioners on the ground within faith communities and policymakers and formal researchers on the other side. So PBK can become that bridge. Third, practitioners are so often the pioneers, people, the ones that really come up with these creative new ways of addressing violence. So for example, and I feel like, I've seen this happening over the last 20 years, it's practitioners who've been reframing scripture to support gender justice, or to create safe disclosure pathways within religious institutions. So we know there are these things that are being done in practice, and that practice is shown to be effective. And I mean, there are people on this call where their organizations have been designing such programming. Like I'm thinking of Transforming Masculinities with Tear Fund, or Channels of Hope with World Vision and Islamic Relief. Capturing and sharing these practices can really ensure that these innovative and context-appropriate approaches inform broader policy. So helping that bridge. Then third, I think PBK can help reveal what's unique about the intersections between faith and violence against women and children. So, for example, we know survivors face stigma, and that's a well-known fact within the violence space. But from working within faith communities with survivors, we see that survivors often experience unique forms of stigma because they're believers and because they live within a faith community. So, for example, then divorcing your husband is against God's will. So any woman who leaves her husband is ostracized and not allowed to go to church or mosque or temple anymore. So practice-based knowledge reveals the nuances and it can help ensure that our responses they're not only survivor-centered in principle, but actually in practice as well. Okay. I've been doing so much talking, but it's going to end now. Next slide, please. Paula, I want to ask if you can, we're going to go into a small group now. If you can maybe break us into 3 groups with about 6 people in each group, if that's okay. Not right now. I still need to read the vignette, but just to give you a heads up. So I've been doing a lot of talking about PBK and how we see it and how we can use it. What I want us to do now in our small group discussions, I'm going to read you a story, a short vignette, and then we're going to break into small groups where I want to ask if you can just in your group, and there's no facilitator assigned to the group, so whoever has the energy today, just take the lead there in that discussion to answer 3 questions based on this story. So what struck you most about the imam's actions? What are the strengths of his approach and what are the potential risks or gaps? And then have you seen similar examples of informal or practice-based responses in your own context? So those will be the 3 things that you post, and Paula will put those questions in a link. Yes, she has already. She's on top of things. So I'm going to read this vignette, and then we're going to break into our small groups. After the small groups, we're bringing it back to the big group to just share what we've been discussing in the small group. Okay, so in a small town, a local imam began to notice a quiet but important shift during his weekly sermons on family life. After services, several women would approach him privately, hesitantly sharing experiences of conflict and, in some cases, violence within their homes. At first, he offered a listening ear, unsure of how best to respond. But then, recognizing the trust placed in him and the weight of responsibility, he began to set aside regular times each week for private listening sessions where women could speak confidentially and without judgment. Over time, the imam drew on his pastoral role and community respect to shape a more intentional approach. He developed his own guiding practices for listening, counseling, and referral, drawing both from Islamic principles of compassion and justice and from what he observed survivors most needed: safety, empathy, and clear pathways to further support. While he never formally documented this process, his consistent practices gradually shaped community expectations. Women began to understand that they could speak out without shame, and men became more aware that violence and mistreatment would be quietly but firmly challenged. The imam's evolving role had a ripple effect. Other faith leaders in the region began to adopt similar approaches, and survivors felt increasing permission to seek help. What began as an improvised response to women's disclosure became, over time, a local model of survivor support within a faith setting, one that was deeply rooted in practice-based knowledge rather than external frameworks. So if you put us in our groups now, Paula, what struck you most? Strengths and risks or gaps of this approach? And have you seen similar examples in your own context? Please, Paula. I'm glad you all made it back. Um, we have a few final minutes. You can use the chat box, but we're a small group, so it'd be lovely if you can share from your small groups, from your breakout groups. And you don't have to respond to a specific question, just maybe something that your small group focused on or discussed a bit. Anyone can go, please.
Hi everyone.
Hey, Nana.
Hi. So I was in group 3 and we had such an interesting conversation because we first started saying like we really loved the role that the imam was playing, creating a safe space for the women to be able to share. So initially we thought one of the gaps was that he wasn't really documenting, and what if something happened to him? How would someone be able to take on and continue the work? But another one of our group members mentioned that confidentiality is actually a really important thing. For most of the women, probably they just wanted to have a safe space to share. So perhaps documenting is not necessarily a gap. So I think for us, the middle ground is maybe being mindful of what he documented. Instead of documenting their stories, is documenting perhaps the strategies or the approaches that he took. Because we also thought it was interesting that beyond being a safe space for the women, he also started to influence the men in the community. How did he do that? Did he take on the conversations that I had with the women and maybe have some, men-to-men conversations? So we thought it was quite interesting. And we mentioned how like faith leaders have such an important and pivotal role to play, because sometimes the destructive belief systems that people have are based on misinterpretation of the holy books. And when you have a faith leader who is well versed in the holy books, then they can kind of use that same thinking to kind of push back on those beliefs and get them thinking of something, of shifting the mindset so that, they start to do better. But yeah, so those are some of our thoughts. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for that and for your group. Something that I just want to connect to is what you said, how you got to the point of needing to be mindful of what we're documenting. And I think that's an important thing when it comes to practice-based knowledge. The ethics of what we're doing and how we're doing it is something that we'll also be discussing in later webinars. And I think I'm so excited that your group already kind of started talking about that. Anyone else?
I'll go for our group.
Thanks,
Everyone
Susie.
brought up some great points. We actually wanted to know what his leadership role was within the broader community, that the other men would actually listen to him, because this is actually really important in the hierarchy and scheme with religious leaders and influence. Some men may be a pastor or whatever, imam, and no one's going to listen to him. So, what type of leadership role did he really have in the broader community? And also one of the things that our group brought up is, what did he do to actually have women feel comfortable talking to him? Because women usually don't want to talk to other men when they've been harmed by men. And you talked about listening, but he had to do more than just listen, because a lot of men can listen, but then they write you off, and you're done, and who cares? So that's a really important barrier that women face all the time. Men may listen, but there's a lot more to that than you read in your story. And we talked briefly about that usually with men, there's this patriarchal vortex, men alliances, they work together, they serve together, they're in, church callings together, whatever. And you need women to break through that with female to female alliances, like where women talking and sharing and saying, yeah, he did great things, et cetera, et cetera. So you can go to him, he's a safe person. Those female alliances are really key to breaking through the patriarchal vortex. So anyway, those are some of the things we talked about. Thank you.
Susie, thanks so much. And so excited about what's already coming out there, because the questions that you're asking about this story. So I think very often if we think simplistically about practice-based knowledge, we say, okay, it's getting the stories of people. And in a way, this vignette is the stories of people that we can find some important learnings from that. But it's also about collecting that story and then asking more questions. And I think like this thing about, so why did they listen? Why did men listen to him? What was it about this imam? So practice-based knowledge, I think, is not, is we might sometimes simplistically think it's just about, okay, I'm just digging inside myself and remembering the things that I've figured out about how to do things, and then I write it down and it's practice-based knowledge. But it's also about, okay, these are the things that we're doing. Why is this working? About engaging with that practice-based knowledge, critically engaging, synthesizing. So it's a research process in that way as well. And I'm so excited, Susie, about your group and how that already came out. The third group, I'm putting you on the spot now. The third group was, I think that was, there's Susie. Arti, your group, you were with Grace and Selena. Now I'm putting you on the spot so badly.
Yes, please. Happy to go. And Miss Selena, you want to go? Okay. Yeah, I'll quickly share, just please add. Selena brought up some amazing points, and that was around how, this is great that what he was doing, but then there are also risks. What if this person doesn't continue, someone new comes? So it's not really institutionalized, and we both really were discussing a great struggle with the translation. So, but both of us were talking about how, if the continuity is not there, if it's not formalized, how does it sustain? But the moment something is formalized, people may shy away from it. So what's really the balance and where does that fit? We spoke about that a little bit, also about what if another person comes in their place and they are not safe, because in these spaces there's also a culture of silencing, etc. But women keep turning to them. What happens then? So the learnings from practice are great. It's a great practice that is working, but it could also change depending on context, situation, person. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm loving what came out this. It's not institutionalized, and so is it sustainable? But if it's institutionalized, what are the risks around it? So, and the answer might not be the same in all contexts. So thank you so much for that, and for your conversation. If we go to the final slide, because we're running out of time. So here's what I want to encourage you. We're going to have 3 more webinars in this series. If you can, please join, and you can also share the links to the recordings with anyone in the COP. Next year, we'll open up the opportunity for a few COP members to sign up that they're accompanied in a process of engaging with practice-based knowledge from their organizations, from their own learning, in a process of identifying it, capturing it, analyzing it, documenting it, not necessarily on paper, but documenting it and using and disseminating it. So that's part of a process for us as COP. It's a pilot to try and figure out how we can support COP members, that they can engage with their own practice-based knowledge and share their own practice-based knowledge in more systematic ways than just, webinars sometimes when we speak with each other. So keep that in mind if that is maybe something that you or your organization may be interested in being part of. The call for that will go out at the start of next year. So don't stress, you'll get emails from me. What I want to leave you with is practice-based knowledge is knowledge. It's not a second-rate thing. That there's formal research up there and PBK down here. So I think it is important, especially for practitioners, to kind of, what we know is amazing and important and great. And let's start kind of challenging that narrative that we need outside consultants for everything. I think PBK is crucial in our faith and GBV work, where trust and relevance matter. And lastly, I think this is that we need to always remember PBK is continuous. It's not like, okay, so we've now gathered our PBK and now it's done. We're constantly generating, evolving, developing practice-based knowledge. What I encourage you to join us in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I'll send out the invite to the next webinar. And next time we'll be focusing on identifying and collecting practice-based knowledge. So how do we identify and collect PBK systematically without losing its authenticity? And there's always going to be that push and pull. I'm warning you now already, there's not going to be black and white answers. We're going to be discussing the messiness of it all. And then from the next session onwards, we're always going to have different experts joining us, sharing their experiences of engaging with their own practice-based knowledge. You'll see there on the slide, SVRI has got an amazing kind of a treasure trove of practice-based knowledge, not just around faith and GBV, but around violence in general. So do want to encourage you to go and take a look there at that link on the slide. And then I hope I'll see you again at our next webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Paula, for handling all the tech, and Morma as well. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.